Would you like to tell us what your doctoral research is about?
Sure. My doctoral research is about understanding local realities of quality education within Kenya, specifically trying to understand effective strategies of school leadership for school improvement. The doctoral study is actually divided into 3 different sections, trying to understand a contextual gap of what are school leaders doing to improve quality education within their schools, a methodological research of how do we actually measure quality education within their schools on a continuous basis with a cohort of 1,000 schools, and then third, a theoretical gap in our understanding of which strategies would associate with self-perceptions of child-friendliness or how we're describing quality education.
Right. What were the main knowledge exchange elements in your project, and who were the partners?
Great. So in order to begin the first question of filling a contextual gap of how do we understand school leadership strategies for quality education, it required driving at this question of why do we care about what we can measure rather than measure what we care about. And so we partnered with the Kenyan Primary School Head Teachers Association, UNICEF Kenya, the UK government, DFID, and the Canadian government, DFAT-D, to engage in this process, this iterative process of participatory learning and action research, in which we brought together 1,000 school leaders and asked them very simple questions of what makes your school child-friendly, why or why not. From those initial conversations, we then narrowed it down to 25 common indicators of what they perceived to be strategies that would improve levels of quality education in their school. Our next problem was, how do we actually continuously understand the process by which they're going to implement their strategies for improvement over the course of a year and a half? It's cost prohibitive to observe and use focus group discussions and interviews across 1,000 remote, rural, and low socioeconomic status schools. So we engaged with local service providers, technology service providers, ecomobile.org, and NASA Education, and even Safaricom, the largest mobile phone company in Kenya, to understand how we could actually utilize what's in every single head teacher's pocket, and that is a mobile phone. And using the platform of SMS to understand their school self-evaluations, of what levels of evidence there are in terms of is there interactive teaching in our school, do we have secure boundaries for our school, and they would then receive a report back in which they would compare their self-evaluations with other schools around the country. From that, we then said, now that you've done a reflective exercise on indicators that you care about, what strategies do you suggest that you would employ to improve your level of quality education? And over the next year and a half, we were able to engage in, rather than an extractive process of data collection, an instructive process of dialogic data exchange. And in the end, our knowledge exchange really had a level of starting at the local, continuing in this national comparison exercise through the SMS platform and online technologies, but then finally has ended in the theoretical and also policy conversation with not only the Kenyan government deciding to alter and change their indicators of what makes a quality learning environment for children, but also the UNICEF international understanding of what makes a child-friendly school.
Right, very interesting. Thank you. How do you combine knowledge exchange and doctoral research? What are the challenges and how do you deal with them?
Absolutely. I think knowledge exchange takes time. It takes development of relationships, and I think it takes an insight into why does someone even want to know what you're studying. So there are different audiences during the doctoral research, my last 3.5 years of doing so, of one, logistics, of who are the gatekeepers, who are understanding the obstacles that current head teachers and even primary school children in Kenya face. And that's when I really developed my relationships with the Directorate of Quality Assurance in the Kenyan Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, and UNICEF Kenya. But then the second question was, well, who are the actual knowledge holders of the question that I'm trying to understand? And those are head teachers themselves, and not the head teachers that are normally sampled in and around Nairobi. But I'm really wanting to understand the realities, those local realities of head teachers 8, 11, even 20 hours away from Nairobi Center in communities that have never even been visited by a local Kenyan school inspector. So trying to understand how I engage in that knowledge exchange required an innovation and use of technology. Not an innovative technology in itself, but an innovative use of that, because SMS is quite basic. But I think the last bit, or the last part of the knowledge exchange for me, and the obstacle was, once you have this we collected over 1 million pieces of data over the course of a year and a half from just within these 1,000 schools, is trying to filter that into useful information for policy decision makers, but also to reconceptualize our academic understanding of effective leadership strategies for schools, particularly in the context of Kenya, when in fact many of the conceptualizations of effective school leadership are imported from research conducted in westernized countries.
Right. So what advice would you give to a doctoral student who's interested in getting involved with knowledge exchange activity?
I think what's really been very helpful for my journey, if you will, is understanding that practitioners really are hungry for research, and researchers are very hungry for practice. That kind of translational learning, of taking what I'm learning in the classroom here at Oxford, here in my seminars or tutorials, and applying it to the real world, but then willing to apply the real world back into the academic discourse and conversation, is something that is quite difficult, but is the most rewarding. I think if I were to have one piece of advice for doctoral researchers coming into this, is find those gatekeepers and make a relationship at the beginning of your research process so that you co-design and you collaborate in setting the questions that matter, so that your policy decision makers or your academic audience actually care about the answers from which your research is supposed to develop.
Great, thank you. Drawing on your overall experience, would you like to talk to us about knowledge exchange as a nexus interweaving national, international, and local dimensions?
Absolutely. I think what's been really interesting was actually being a part of the World Innovation Summit in Education in Doha, in Qatar, last November, when the conversation began about redeveloping the Millennium Development Goals into the Sustainable Development Goals and what that would mean for education. Are we talking about improving access to education, or improving access to quality education? That kind of high-level discussion and high-level debate required evidence from the most local stakeholders in the world. And those are those who care for and supervise and instruct and inspire local, very, very underprivileged students around the world. And those gatekeepers and those caretakers are head teachers in most places. And what I was able to offer through the research experience was translating and being an ambassador of those head teachers' experiences to the global discourse, and bringing the global discourse back to the practitioners at the ground level. So I think the nexus of having knowledge exchange be a platform in which you can combine different voices in ways that would inform and inspire others is really the challenge of research in itself, of how do you negotiate local realities with national priorities and international goals in terms of improving quality education. And that for me is an exciting nexus to be a part of. And when I think of knowledge exchange, it's not an event. It's a continuous process that continues to develop another agenda of questions that require further research and exploration.
Great, thank you very much.
Great.